After your question has been answered, please lower your hand. And then I'll also be monitoring the chat box and alerting Ben to what's being written there. So just as a quick introduction, we have Ben Schuler here. Now I've got a quick, sorry about this, folks. Okay, so our session today is, I like to move it, the true advantages of the long white cane. The questions that are kind of posed in the agenda are, does the material of the cane is made of really make that big of a difference? How about the length of the cane? Isn't a folding cane just as easy or easier than a straight cane? Find answers to all of these questions and more. So we have Ben Schuler here with us. He's an NOMC. And Ben, if you don't mind just kind of explaining a little bit about yourself and doing your own introduction, and we'll get going.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, my name's Ben Schuler. I teach cane travel at the Louisiana Center for the Blind. And a little bit about myself, I did my undergrad at Georgia State and got my bachelor's in psychology. And throughout that time, I got the opportunity, after doing my own training at LCB, I got the opportunity to teach summer programs. And, you know, primarily before getting my master's degree was when I did most of my teaching with transition youth. So pretty much worked with kids in a variety of ages, ages roughly 9 to 19, I would say would be a good kind of range for that period of time. I've had some experience working in the public schools and also working with younger kids as well. I've taught someone as young as 3 years old how to use a cane, and which was absolutely a blast. You know, I'm really passionate about this message about our kids using canes and knowing that it's okay to use a cane and that they should. You know, the cane is just such an important tool. For me in my own life, I did not use a cane initially after going blind. I went blind at 16. And so, you know, I want to be really clear in this talk today with you guys that, you know, regardless of the type of cane, the really important thing is that kids are getting canes in their hands and using them to explore their environment. So generally speaking, right, there are two broad types of canes. There's the NFB style cane, and there's more of a traditional cane that a lot of traditionally trained instructors will use. And so there, of course, are other types of canes other than that, but the real goal today is to talk about some of the advantages of why we use the long white cane, the NFB cane. And so I think before getting into some of that, it's just really important to talk about why using a cane is important. You know, if you think about it, if you are a child who's blind from an early age, you're constantly learning about your environment. Whether you have a cane or not, you are sort of internalizing what it means to explore the world. And so, you know, what we see a lot is, you know, when kids are exploring the world and they don't have a cane, they're learning that it's unsafe to explore because it is unsafe for a lot of them. They are, you know, having more accidents, falling over things, you know, not picking up on obstacles that if they don't have a cane to find it, then oftentimes they're going to be finding it with their bodies. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of talk about things like pre-canes and stuff like that. But, you know, the real crux of it is that you want to get a cane in the hand of a kid definitely by the time they're walking, if not earlier. I read a really good article this week, kind of in preparation for this talk, in Future Reflections by Mary Noel Chamberlain. And she talked about the importance of getting a cane in the hands of kids from an early age. And, it's hard for me to overstate how important that is, whether it's an NFB cane or another type of cane. It is super important for them to have tools that allow them to explore their environment safely. It's been really interesting, like now coming from sort of a background working with youth, and then now being in a position where I'm working with adults primarily, what I see now is a lot of students, when they come to us, if they haven't used a cane early on, a lot of times there's a thought of like, oh, well, my child can see a little bit, so they don't need a cane. And I can't say enough how many times I've seen that's just not the case. They show up here a lot of times. We get students that have issues with gait, have issues walking in a way that's adaptive to them, that's going to help them balance. So what that looks like is someone who doesn't walk heel to toe, someone who drags their feet when they walk, and by the time we see them here, we work really hard to correct that, of course, and in many cases we can make changes. And sometimes it's so ingrained that it becomes really hard to make those changes because they've been walking that way from the time they started walking. What happens is they've sort of built in some of these behaviors, like these protective behaviors, because they don't have a cane. Research has shown that it's not a blindness thing. For someone to have unusual gait, doesn't have anything to do with blindness. What it has to do with is them not having a cane early on. And so I think one thing that I want to really emphasize during this talk is just the importance of blind children having a cane and using it early and often, regardless of what type that cane is. Now, obviously, here at the Louisiana Center for the Blind, we know that the best tool for the job is the NFB cane. It definitely, there are a lot of reasons why we know that it's effective. And I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit now about just sort of some various aspects of the cane and why it's beneficial. And so I want to start off with talking about the length of the cane. That's probably the most common question that we get as travel instructors, is how tall should the cane be? And, there's sort of a range depending on who you ask. Some people will tell you the upper lip to the top of the forehead. My opinion is, and what we teach here, is that it should come up to the bridge of the nose. That's going to, generally speaking, give you the best range for when you're walking, having about 2 to 3 steps reaction time. And so what that looks like with kids is you want them to be able to walk just as quickly as their sighted peers. And so if the cane is not tall enough, they're not going to be able to do that effectively. They're not going to have the reaction time that they need while they're exploring their environment. So having a cane that's tall enough up to the bridge of the nose is super important. Some of that's going to change depending on pace or gait. There might be some changes that the student's O&M instructor recommends, and that's okay. And some people, over time, their cane is going to get taller as their pace increases. But I would say that the best starting point is the bridge of the nose. The next question that I get asked a lot is about a straight cane versus a folding cane. Wouldn't a folding cane just be easier, is in the notes of this presentation. And for me, that was my thought. When I was 16 and I lost my sight, I did not want to be seen with a cane. It was extremely embarrassing for me because I believed, like so many people, that it was embarrassing to use a cane, or it somehow made me less than. And it's really important, as many of you know already, it's important to promote the fact that the cane is a tool for independence. So we want to promote the cane as a positive thing. If the child or the student is learning that they need to hide their cane or fold it up, it sort of sends, it sends a mixed message. And it did for me, I can say. You know, my experience was I would use my folding cane during O&M, and then the rest of the time it would go in the filing cabinet in the resource room. And it took me a while to really get comfortable with it. But especially, you know, from someone who's been blind from an early age, the quicker you can get a straight cane in their hand, the more comfortable they're going to be with it, generally speaking. They're not going to have those issues. You know, it's kind of funny, like talking to professionals in the field, a lot of times the question comes up like, well, what about safety, right? If my child's not storing the cane appropriately, couldn't people trip over it? And we all know busy classrooms with kids running around and stuff like that. That's a legitimate concern, right? You want to make sure that the cane is stored in a good spot where it's not going to trip people. But we've got to put that responsibility on the student. That's got to be something that's taught and reinforced. I think kind of an analogy is like, you know, there's a lot of things that could happen with sighted kids when they do things in class. You know, we don't make sighted kids take their shoes off. It's kind of a silly example, but we don't make sighted kids take their shoes off when they go into class because they might throw them around. We expect them to keep their shoes on their feet and in the proper place. And I look at the cane really just like a pair of shoes. What we want to get to is the point where the cane is looked at like an extension of the student. You know, I look at my cane like an extension of myself. And that's the goal, is to really from an early age be sending that message and have the, you know, I don't even want to say high expectation, but just the really normal expectation that, you know, that's going to be something that the student's going to do. And if they fail to do that, like any other sort of discipline issue, then there may be consequences for that, right? So I think it's important just to have really normal expectations for our blind kids, especially when it comes to cane storage. That's going to be something they're going to have to do for the rest of their life. And so starting that from an early age is really, really key. From kind of a more practical side of things, you know, there are times where a folding cane might be convenient. I personally recommend it as a backup for people. And the reason that I feel so strongly about it is because I know the benefits that the straight cane has. You know, we talk a lot in O&M about tactile feedback, and all that means is the information you get by feeling something with your cane. And so you're getting that information by the vibrations that are transferred from your cane up to your arm and up to your brain. So with each fold in a folding cane, you're losing some of that tactile information. And so if you think about, you know, someone who's learning to travel, you want to give them the best tool where they're going to be able to get the most information as possible. And the straight cane just simply gives them more tactile information from kind of an objective point of view. They're going to pick up on a lot more because they're not losing that tactile feedback with each fold or with each joint in the cane. The other thing that the folding canes have that can impact tactile information is a lot of times folding canes will have a rubber cord or a string going down the middle, and that absorbs a lot of the vibrations and can impact the amount of tactile feedback that the person is getting when they're using the cane. Let's see here. So the next thing I have is talking about the material that the NFB canes have. So there's two types of material, fiberglass and carbon fiber. And both of those materials, the reason why we use those are because they are lightweight. They're lightweight and they're good at conducting that tactile information. So again, going back to the weight, canes are going to be hollow, and that is so that the canes can be easy to move and light. So the reason you're needing the cane to be easy to move is because you want to make sure, especially with kids from, you know, kind of younger kids, the main thing you're looking for is, are they arcing the cane wide enough and are they covering their body? A lot of the kind of nuances of technique, you know, you may not be quite as picky with if it's a really, really young student, but you definitely want to see that they're covering their body. And so the weight of the cane has a big, big impact on that. As you can imagine, if you're moving it back and forth all the time, you want something that's going to be light and comfortable for them to use.
Ben?
Difference that we see a lot is in the handle. NFB canes have a round handle, and the more traditional style canes have sort of like, if you picture a golf club, they have sort of a rounded handle with one of the sides that is going to be more flat. And so what ends up happening with that flat side is so that the student can extend their index finger down the cane. And what happens then is you see a lot of wear in those canes on one side. And so the cane can become unbalanced over time because part of it's getting worn down. And so balance just means like how evenly the cane is being arced on either side, basically, or the weight of the cane being kind of evenly proportioned. And so because of the way that wears, they're only using sort of one side of that cane, one part. So it tends to wear down pretty quickly. Whereas with a rounded handle, the benefit is that cane's naturally gonna rotate. And so you kind of have more room to work with. The wear tends to be more even. The next thing I want to bring up is the tip of the cane. And so the NFB canes have a metal tip, and there's a couple different reasons that we use that metal tip. The main one being, as we've already talked about a lot, that tactile feedback. The metal tip is going to be a denser, harder material that's going to give you more information about what you're feeling. It's going to pick up on things like texture changes, the difference between a street and a sidewalk, the difference between different types of tile. If you have a smooth tile floor and maybe a rougher tile floor with a lot of grout lines, that information is going to be easier to feel because of the metal tip. And not only does the metal tip make a difference with tactile feedback, but where you see a big difference is in the auditory information that you're getting. So what I'm talking about there is really the echolocation. The metal tip is going to produce a higher pitched sound when the cane is tapped. And studies have shown that it's actually easier for humans to hear the sound waves traveling back from a higher pitched sound. They're going to be able to pick up on solid objects farther away. Joe Cutter is a guy that wrote a great book. If anyone is looking for more resources on this, I'm going to mention his book again in just a second. It's called Independent Movement and Travel for Blind Children, Promotion Model. And I would encourage anyone wanting to kind of take a deeper dive into this to read Joe Cutter. He really puts into words a lot of the reasons why we do what we do with kids, has some great suggestions in there. But one of the things that he talks about is how the cane is a tool for previewing the environment. And basically what that means is the cane is a tool for finding out information before the person actually gets there. And so you can preview the environment tactily, or you can preview it through tapping the cane and maybe hearing that there is an object like a light pole on the sidewalk, or a trash can, or a parked car in the driveway. And so previewing your environment is going to be more effective. Picking up on those echoes is going to be way more effective if you have a higher pitched sound, because you're going to hear those sound waves bouncing back at you easier. You know, I know that like a lot of this has been kind of the technical side of why we use the type of cane that we do. You know, I guess in sort of in closing, I want to give you guys a couple more resources, but I want to say that, you know, there's a reason if you go to a national convention, you know, my suggestion would be just to pay attention to the people who are traveling, which you see as really confident travelers that are moving around really effectively in their environment, and pay attention to what type of cane they use. And I really think that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. When you get to be in an environment when you're seeing so many adults, I think that's one of the really cool things about this organization and the convention itself. is you get to see a lot of people, not just saying that, oh, this cane is really good, but you get to really see why that's the case, and seeing it being put into action says more than I could ever say in a presentation. I think that one thing that I'll often do with students, because I know how effective this tool is I'll say to them, hey, you don't have to use this cane forever. When I'm in a setting other than a training center, I've said to people a lot, hey, try this for 2 months. And if you want to go back to the old kind, we can talk about that at that point. And honestly, like, it's the overwhelming majority of people that are like, man, I don't want to go back at all. Once people see how effective the long white cane is, they stick to it because they see that it works for them. There's a couple of really great resources as parents that I want to mention. There is the Cane Exchange, and so you can find more information about that on the NFB's website. And basically what that is as your child is growing up, obviously they're changing sizes of canes pretty frequently as they grow taller. And so that program is in place so that you can be able to get them a taller cane and trade your cane in for someone who might have a student who's shorter, a child who's shorter. There's also the free white cane program. And so if your child doesn't have a cane, or maybe your child isn't getting O&M services and you want to try it out, then that's a great way of just getting a cane in their hands. For me, when I had went blind, it was a big adjustment using the cane, and that is something that can take some time. But I think that what it's done for me is it's allowed me to be like much more effective. My fear in using the cane was that I wasn't going to be able to move around normally. And meanwhile, what I was doing was I was moving a lot slower. I was looking down at the ground. I was sticking out like a sore thumb because I was so resistant to using the cane. And, what it's done for me is it showed me that I can have this tool that allows me to really be just like everybody else, to move just as effectively as everybody else. It's not to say that people don't notice a cane, because as I'm sure you guys have experienced, they certainly do. But those are the types of things that as blind people we're having to deal with for the rest of our lives. And so getting really good at handling those situations early on is way more effective than sort of putting them aside like I did for so long. And so I'm super passionate about working with people that are younger, and I think it's really important that we're consistent when we explain to them and show them that the cane is going to be a tool that allows them to get the independence that they want. The cane is really a good equalizer because otherwise they're having to do all these extra things like shuffling their feet or having weird gait or being scared about exploring their environment. And that was definitely the case for me. So I think regardless of what type of cane someone is using, obviously you can tell I have an opinion about it. And I think it is important to get someone using the NFB cane if possible. But the real important thing to do, I don't want to miss the forest for the trees here, because what is absolutely critical is that if someone is blind, they are using a cane. It's going to make such a big difference. So with that, I'd really like to open it up to any questions, or really hear from you guys about, your experiences. What's been helpful to you getting your student the cane travel training they need, or communicating with maybe their O&M instructor about the type of cane that they need. So I'm wondering if we can open it up to questions, or maybe people can share what's been helpful to them.
Thanks. So we have Jasmine that's had her hand up. Go ahead, Jasmine. Jasmine Polite.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Story. I am not a parent or but I am a blind student, and I want to share my experience with using the cane. So I went to blind school and everything, and back when I was back in back in when I was young, I had a bad habit of not using my cane because I was afraid of people making fun of me, and I have like I have like many things wrong with my eyes. One of them is glaucoma, and I have some other things, other conditions that impair my vision to where I could easily trip over something. So, yes, I was afraid of people making fun of me until, I didn't bring my cane with me one day when I was going to an event, and I tripped and fell, and I felt really dumb I have, my vision's really bad, and I should have known better, but, you know, from then on, I started using my cane, and then I really started using my cane when I joined the NFB, and I had a mentor named Ted Hart, and he was really strict on me about using my cane, and that I need to practice, really fix my cane's travel skills because they were not good, and today I'm really big on using my cane, and I don't care what people think of me. My advice is to anyone who is starting to use a cane is to think about your safety first, and don't care what the sighted community thinks of you. If people make fun of you because you're using a cane, or they think you're weird, because at the end of the day, you're the only one that knows what you need, and you know that you can't see, and that the cane is beneficial. And in my case, I have no peripheral vision from glaucoma and my other eye conditions, and I'm blind in one eye, and I definitely need a cane. I have written an article for the Future Reflections back in 2018 on my cane, and how I began to use it, and what changed my attitude towards it. And I hope that you guys look at that, because the speaker said, like, the cane is really important, and I take my cane with me everywhere so I don't get hurt or anything, and I let people know I'm visually impaired, and no, I'm not going to stop using my cane because I cannot see, and I could easily hurt myself really badly if I don't have it. So
Thank you so much, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
Great insights. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Ben? Ben, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, that'd be great. I can't unmute you, Ben, but I'm going to hop over to Alfonso. Alfonso, if you want to take your turn.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Alfonso. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I've been using the white cane for almost 10 years. I originally started with the New Mexico Commission for the Blind, and the issue was I've been born blind, been blind since birth. I have no peripheral vision. I'm blind with my right eye, and I've been using the white cane for almost 10 years. And the only issue that I have is that I'm very sensitive to tactile textures. Like, there's certain textures might get me sick, some textures that I'm afraid of. I don't know if I'm the only one. Like, I have to use a rolling cane tip that's big, like a rolling ball tip. Again, any other tip will get me sick. I don't know if has anyone experiencing sensitivity to texture, like strong sensitivity, where to the point where they make them sick to their stomach or something like that, or they're bothered by a certain texture?
So Alfonso, this is Sarah. I know that in our state, we have lots of parents that have kids that have texture sensitivities. And yeah, so you're talking about a cane that has a grip that is silicone, is that correct?
The cane tip itself.
Oh, the grip, is it the grip that you have a sensitivity to the texture to?
No, it's the tactile information.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I can jump in here real quick.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, no worries. So I think that Alfonso, there are some cases where some people do better with other cane tips. So it's definitely not a one size fits all solution. For some students, you gotta work with each individual student. And, I would say that you got to use what works for you at the end of the day. There are also some things that you might check out that you can do as far as like putting things over a metal tip or so I know that there are a lot of instructors out there that have done different things with people with a sensitivity to textures. So if that's working for you, man, that's totally awesome. I think that's great. You got to use what works.
Yeah, but I just wonder if I was the only one that have issue with texture sensitivity, texture, or something like that.
You are definitely not the only one. No.
Experience thickness with textures.
Yeah, you're not the only one. That I've heard of other people that have had similar issues. I would say that it's not a common issue that we see a lot, but it happens. It happens. So thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one. I feel better now.
Thanks, Alfonso. Can we have Leanne Johnson go next?
Yes, my name is Leanne, and I'm actually a blind senior. Actually, I have glaucoma, so it's peripheral vision that's getting worse. And I have questions about using the cane because, like, we live on a dirt road, and I can, it's hard to feel like potholes and bumps. I don't know if there's special techniques for that.
There is. So briefly, I'll kind of go through what you want to be doing in that situation, Hannah. Is using more of a constant contact. So keeping the tip of your cane on the ground and sort of lightly skimming the environment, as opposed to usually you'd be sort of tapping on either side of you. And this constant contact technique is where you keep your cane on the ground and lightly skim over the top of the environment. So when you're in an uneven area like that, I like to tell people the more movement you're getting with the cane, the better off you'll be. You still want to be covering your body. All of the things that you do in other settings, you want to continue to do. But as a general rule, the more movement, the better in that situation. If you think about when people are looking visually at that information, they're scanning their environment. And so you want to do the same thing with your cane. Constant contact is definitely, or keeping your tip on the ground is definitely more appropriate for that setting. That's a great question.
So constant contact, and you said frequent movement. So that means going back and forth more frequently?
Correct. Yeah. Going back and forth, or some people call that arcing the cane, pretty frequently. In general, you still want to kind of do that the same as if you were walking in another area. So you want to be walking in step. So when your right foot's forward, your cane's going to be on your left side. When your left foot's forward, your cane's going to be on the right side. And so, but there may be times if you're in kind of a tricky spot that you got to get a little more information. You're going to have to move your cane back and forth a few times. And so the more movement, the better in those really tricky spots. Absolutely. It's a great question.
Okay. I have two more things. Another one is sometimes like on sidewalks at the cracks, the tip gets stuck in that. Is there a way to avoid that, or part of the process?
Excellent question. So yes and no. So it's an interesting question because some of that sort of takes care of itself as you get a little more experience using the cane. I would say that general advice would be two things for that. Making sure that your cane is in between your belly button and your belt buckle. So making sure that the handle is at a height that's going to allow your tip to glide across the ground easier. And then you want to, believe it or not, you want to actually loosen your grip up a little on the cane so that it's not real tight. That's also one reason why the metal tips work really effectively is because the part of the tip that connects to the cane is rubber. So it's going to have a little bit of flex in it so that it should glide over some of that. What you're going to find, your speed increases, your cane's going to glide over those small cracks and stuff a lot easier, depending on the size of them. And sometimes for really big stuff, you sort of over time are going to remember that's there and then change up your technique a little bit accordingly, if that makes sense.
Like learning the route.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that. The other thing, it has to do with like, you're arcing the cane. I learned that you hold your hand in the middle of your body going back and forth.
That's right.
I'm having issues with my shoulder. So do you always have to do that, or can you do it where you're starting, like I'm right-handed, so with my arm on the right-hand side, or is there any way to avoid the issue with my shoulder?
So it's a little hard to say without working with you, but I'll speak generally. Generally speaking, it's actually not super hard. Generally speaking, you want to keep your hand centered. The reason for that is it's going to affect how straight you walk. And so a lot of times why people will start to keep their hand at their side more is they may be extending their index finger down the shaft of their cane. And so if you can, you want to make sure that that index finger is wrapped around the handle of the cane. And it is, I think you have a pretty good gut feeling where you want to keep it centered as much as possible. That is actually super important.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
One other tip with that is if you're having trouble with that, you can take your free hand and kind of hold it on your wrist like you're checking your pulse. And that helps people in the early stages kind of keep track, like, okay, am I still holding my cane in the center of my body? Thinking about if it's between your belly button and belt buckle will also help you with that. So
okay. So the belly button has to do with the angle of the tip to the ground, right?
Yeah, that's probably why your cane is catching a lot. Hard to know without seeing you, but I would say that a high percentage of the time, that's what causes it.
Thank you. And if I have other questions, how would I be able to ask in next week if I'm working and I want to have I have some more questions?
Sure. So I would say that the best thing possible really would get you plugged in with someone providing some O&M services, because it's really hard to say without working with you consistently. I would say that if you were to reach out to your local chapter or contact me here at the center, and maybe we can figure out some ways as far as getting you plugged in with some O&M services in your area. It's going to make the learning curve a heck of a lot easier.
Great, thank you. I missed the very beginning, so what is your name?
My name is Ben Schuler.
Thank you.
No worries.
Just a quick note, Leanne and others that might be here with kids or children that are aged 14 and up. Usually the rehab services in your area can help with coordinating and getting an O&M instructor for your child. If they're above, say, the age of high school or something, you can get in touch with the rehab services in your area. Or if you don't have the contact information, reach out to your local affiliate president, like Ben recommended, to make sure that you've got an O&M instructor that you can work with either in person or virtual, if that's what they're doing right now.
Great. Thank you very, very much.
We have in our chat, Sandra Oliver is going next. And then Jasmine Polite has her hand up after Sandra. Thanks.
How are you doing?
Great. Hi, Ben. Good. Great conversation. So I'm a parent of a blind child. So Nick is 14 and he's been blind since birth. So he's a cane user for sure. We get O&M services through the school and through the state. But one thing, and Nick went to LCB, I guess it's been 2 summers ago. So while he has a white cane, he hasn't really been trained regularly with it.
Sure.
So, because that's not what they use, the O&M, uses here at school. So part of it is just figuring out what's the best way. And I guess it ties on to the last question to maybe, everything I hear is that it's the better cane for many reasons, all that you described, but I'm unclear on how to get Nick kind of trained with the long white cane when that's not really what the O&M uses here. And so what's the best way to try to make that switch?
So that's a great question. And I open it up. Maybe if there's been people that have had successful experiences with that. The one thing that I would say, because to be honest with you, I don't have a ton of personal experience with that. I would say that what I do know is that parents do have a lot of power in terms in the IEP. I would think that talking with the O&M instructor, obviously, about it, and I'm sure that that may be something you've done already, talking about some of the benefits of why the long white cane is effective. But then if that doesn't work, maybe even in an IEP setting, bringing in an advocate, and that may be a situation where your local chapter could help. You know, the reality is sometimes the O&M instructor is going to really have a certain preference for a certain type. And so I think that's why our summer programs are so effective, is because it does, if they're getting that exposure in school, it does provide another avenue for it.
It's just more about, I think she would, I mean, I don't think she would object to us having the long white cane or Nick using it. It's just she's not trained in it, so she's not gonna be effective to help reinforce what he learned. But you've given me some things to think about, and I think the more I think about it, maybe the NFB state, Norma Crosby, we're in Texas, maybe talking to her about doing getting somebody who has the long white cane training to work with Nick outside of school might be an easier way to go. So
yeah, I can tell you what I've done sometimes too with people in, if you get a student through one of the summer programs, sometimes that can be sort of an avenue of then having their counselor there talk directly, or even the director of the summer talking directly. And then you can sort of go at it from more of a standpoint of, I want to reinforce the positive skills that he's learned in the program because it's been 2 months that he's been here. I like what you said, working with Norma and finding out about local resources outside of school. So I hope some of this has been helpful, kind of us brainstorming it out together.
yeah, no, it's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, this is Sarah. It is 10:45, but I just wanted to add and ask, since Sandra brought that question up, that's a common, our daughter is 6, so we've come across that already. The instructor, cane mobility instructor, says, well, I'm not really trained to deal with the long white cane, the NFB cane. And I'm like, the techniques aren't that different, in my opinion. Like, if you're using the cane properly, you're using the cane properly. But is there a guide already that's out there from someone who might be an O&M instructor but not an NFB? So if you can maybe just explain a little bit about the NOMC versus the other O&M.
Sure. So basically, there are sort of 2 approaches to cane travel, right? There's the traditional approach, and then there's the cognitive approach, or the NOMC. Traditional, you'll see the initial COMS behind someone's name, and the NOMC approach really emphasizes the long white cane, while the traditional approach emphasizes typically like an Ambutech cane, a shorter cane with a golf grip handle, because that's what they're trained on. As you pointed out, like a lot of times, it's just because that's what the instructor is trained on. And so, I think that I'm trying to think off the top of my head about maybe some resources. So to get back to your question real fast, like the main difference in some of that is going to be some of the technique that the NOMCs teach tends to differ a little bit. And some of it doesn't. It really depends on the instructor, to be honest with you. But what I see a lot of traditionally trained people, when I see them in training, is a lot of times they will have their index finger extended down the shaft. That's the telltale sign of someone who's been traditionally trained. And sometimes there's some cases where, I have trained people to do that. It's pretty rare, but there's situations where that might be appropriate. But I would say that overall, if you get an NOMC, you're going to get someone who's working on open palm grip, centering the cane. There are so many differences between the NOMC approach and the traditional approach. I feel like that's definitely a whole nother presentation in and of itself. But What I can say is that it also depends on the instructors. So what we're starting to see now is some traditional instructors are picking up things from NOMCs, and they're incorporating some of that because they're seeing that a lot of this stuff that we're doing is having results. And I think more and more you're seeing that, but sometimes they just don't know any other way. So there's a lot of good resources online. There's a book, Joe Cutter's book, Independent Movement and Travel for Blind Children, is a great resource. Care and Feeding of the Long White Cane is another great book that goes over some basics of appropriate technique. There is also a really great video that someone did. He's an instructor at the Iowa Department for the Blind. If you YouTube Iowa Department for the Blind Cane Travel, he has a really great video covering some of the basics of open palm. His name is Zach. He did a really great video on that. There are definitely a ton of resources out there, a lot of really good information in Future Reflections. But as far as stuff that's marketed to O&M people, I would encourage them to take a look at Joe Cutter's book. I know it's something that I go back and reread very frequently. There's a lot of really good information there.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think for those of us who do have a child that's receiving O&M lessons, being aware of the difference, and then you can say, I want you to train my child to do structured discovery, and you don't, maybe some of the terms that you use might be, in our state, I've realized that it's kind of a taboo thing because some teachers are like, oh, I can't teach NFB here, that technique and stuff. So just being aware and saying, I want you to make sure my child knows when they approach a street which way the traffic is going and things like that. And just all of those different concepts, you don't have to use those terms or say that it's, I want you to teach my child NOMC style, but that you're aware is really helpful.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like focusing on the fact that you want the child not to learn just a particular route, but you want him or her to learn the fundamental skills. So how do they know that they're at any street, not just that one street corner? How do they know that? How do they know that they are finding a building in any parking lot, not just learning the route to find that particular grocery store or whatever? So I like what you said about sometimes getting caught up in the language of it can kind of turn people away. So talking about the concept, super important. Absolutely.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming and being here. A couple of things in the chat. And Mary Noel Chamberlain left a link on a dissertation study. She has her doctorate, correct, Mary Noel?
She does.
Chamberlain, yeah, in O&M, and
Yes,
she's a great resource on for parents of children. There's the Facebook group, O&M. Now I'm finding where it was. Sorry, it's an O&M for children, Orientation and Mobility for Children Facebook group.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. I'm on there and we get all excited about all things O&M. Also, oh, Mary Noel posted a dissertation study comparing those two approaches. Thanks, Mary. And great resources here. And just, I think for me, this has been kind of like a tease in being able to see what our kids can have access to when they're old enough, sending them to an NFB training center for some O&M skills. There's just so much that our kids have access to. And the more we know, the more we can kind of be a part of that. Natalia also posted that she's an NOMC, and then just talking about the philosophy, the importance of that child being the primary person that is in charge of their independence and their own blindness, and letting them make their own decisions, and then supporting the child.
Absolutely. I would just re-encourage people to check out the summer programs that the training centers offer. If they're wondering more about structured discovery, cane travel, those are really, really great resources to get people, to get students just kind of a taste of what structured discovery is about if they're maybe having trouble getting services in their area. I know here in Louisiana, we have the Step and Buddy program, and I know at CCB and Blind Inc., there's also great summer programs. And so I really want to put a plug in for those, but I want to thank you guys so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys about such an important topic. This definitely could have went a lot longer because it's such a great topic. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks so much, Ben Schuler, for presenting and sharing your expertise and experiences. This is a super meeting today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ben.
Guys.